What's up, everybody? It's Nitro Show. I'm Burl.
I'm Streit.
All right, we're talking college football this week. We got a lot of fun stuff going on. So, in the state of Ohio, they are trying to pass a bill to ban 12 p.m. noon kickoffs.
Man. Big noon Saturday.
Oh my god.
You've got the Ohio State representative Tex, that's his real name, Tex Fisher, presenting a bill to try to end noon kickoffs for Ohio State.
Except against Michigan.
Except against Michigan, because that's tradition. Here's the long and short of it. It would prevent Ohio State from kicking off a game before 3:30 when the opponent is another state university, or if both teams are ranked in the AP top 10.
So I'm assuming that this would only be enforceable if the game is played at Ohio State.
I don't think that was the ruling. Like, I think by letter of the law, it was a game involving Ohio State. And they said that how the bill's written is that the violating the regulation would be a $10 million fine against the television network, or if it was against another team, out of conference team, it would be against the host team's conference.
I don't know how they can enforce that, because it's across state lines, and that technically falls under federal jurisdiction. And what a dumbass rule.
I mean, it really is. Like, there are so many stupid court battles going on right now. You've heard about, obviously, the state of Tennessee is now basically trying to sue to say that it doesn't have to listen to the Supreme Court ruling on the whole rev share thing, that they can just do whatever they want. And they're basically going against the SEC. So, Tennessee, always wanting to fight somebody, is barking up that tree. But this is just ridiculous. This all stems down to this big noon kickoff. Fox has always wanted to compete with ESPN and CBS when SEC had CBS. And so they used to put their big games on at 12 o'clock. And basically Ohio State fans are complaining because they're the best team in the Big Ten, and they have been for years. And they can't put Oregon home games on big noon kickoffs, really, because that's 9 a.m. West Coast. So,
well, yeah, but I mean, you just think about it. How awesome are night games on campus?
They are awesome.
And they got their taste last year in the first round of the playoffs against Tennessee, of all people. And it was a really cool atmosphere.
And I think they got a taste of what they had been missing, especially with ESPN taking over the SEC contract this year. And almost all of the big games in 2024 in the SEC were primetime games, whereas before they used to be that 3:30 CBS kickoff time.
Yeah, the good old 3:30 CBS kickoff. Miss those, Uncle Vern. Don't miss Gary Danielson, and he's
retired,
now, right?
Yeah, he retired. Yeah. The 3:30 CBS kickoff is now like the fourth Big Ten game. I think they pick after Peacock in their selection.
Wow, after Peacock?
Right.
Dang. CBS is regretting that decision.
Well, I think they ended up paying more money than they would have ended up paying for the SEC too. That's the dumbest part. They didn't want to pay what ESPN was going to pay for the SEC. And so they lost out on that bidding, and then they ended up paying more for worse games out of the Big Ten.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah, but like you said, it is funny that the Michigan game is the exemption, and I guess it's because they usually play that game at noon. So it's just funny. You would pass a law, but accept the Michigan game. But what happens if Michigan's horrible? Well, maybe the Michigan game.
Yeah, well, why wouldn't you want to play that game at night?
Right.
I mean,
like if there was any game that you would want to play at night.
Yeah, I mean, think about those classic Iron Bowl games. They just wouldn't have hit as hard, if it was a day game.
Right, a noon game.
Yeah, I mean, the kick six, pick one of those moments.
Right. Anyone in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many crazy ones. Good Lord.
So speaking of Ohio State, Urban Meyer was talking this week again. And he said that based on his experience of having coached in the SEC and coaching in the Big Ten, he says he thinks that the Big Ten finally, after winning 2 straight national championships, has passed the SEC, except in one area. And that area is depth. So his thought is that the Big Ten, when he first got there, the adage was that the Big Ten was slow, that SEC speed was so much better. But he said he thinks, particularly a lot of the work that he did and has been done at Ohio State, that they've kind of helped change that a little bit in the conference. And he thinks that the top of the SEC is not as good as the top of the Big Ten right now. What do you think?
It's hard to argue against it, frankly. I mean, last 2 national champions come from the Big Ten. You had Oregon ranked number 1 all year long. Georgia ends up losing to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's right there in that geographic area of the Big Ten. So I think Penn State was really, really good last year too. And with NIL, you're seeing a lot more of these guys that would have been in the SEC going all over the place. So I don't think he's too far off base. And as much as I just want to disagree with Urban Meyer on principle, I can't do it this time.
Yeah, I think he's kind of right about the top, definitely. Because if you look at the top 4 teams in the Big Ten, and in Oregon to a lesser extent, but really those top 3 traditional Big Ten teams, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, those are 3 huge universities with huge alumni bases that have a lot of money too. And they are all 3 spending a lot in NIL. So the area where they may not have had the recruiting ground that they did before, they're making up with NIL spending. But the one thing that Urban did say is he said he felt that the depth of SEC was still better. He said that Big Ten, very top heavy. He said, you look at the SEC, every year, even now in this expanded SEC, you've got 8 or 9 teams that realistically, if the chips fell right, could win the conference. And the guys even at the bottom of the SEC are better than the guys at the bottom of the Big Ten. So I think he is right on that. So as much as we dislike Urban Meyer and some of the opinions he says, in this case, I think you're right. Like, I think he's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And to the Big Ten's credit, they're getting more depth there too. I mean, look at Illinois. They kind of came out of nowhere last year, beat South Carolina in the bowl game.
They did. And Bielema was a good coach. I know he caught a lot of flack for the work that he did at Arkansas and, run the football, play defense. But as much as Illinois is not a team that's going to compete with Ohio State and Michigan for all the same recruits. They're just not at the end of the day. They don't have the football tradition to be able to build that program back up that, had always hoped to even just get to a bowl game. They're probably going to be top 15 headed into the year next year. So that they're coming a long way too. And you're forgetting to mention Indiana, obviously, who came out of nowhere, last year as well.
Yeah, I'm okay. Indiana.
We'll see if it was a flash in the pan, right?
Yeah.
Kurt Cignetti's still talking a lot of trash, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, he still didn't beat any top 25 teams, did he?
I don't think so.
Yeah, he said that's all he does. It's like Obi-Wan against Sith Lords. Oh man. So talking about SEC in depth and who's going to be at the top. A lot of talk around LSU being a favorite this year.
You're right.
What's some of the rumblings going on there?
Yeah, so I was listening to Crane and Company, which is a pretty good college football podcast if you don't listen to it. And they had JD Pickell from On3 on there the other day, and they were doing their SEC power rankings. Now, the difference that a lot of times people do is they look ahead and they want to project. Well, Florida has a ridiculously hard schedule, so we're not going to rank them as high or whatever. They specifically said, when we do this, we are not going to look at schedule. We are going to assume they have the teams that they have now and just base it how powerful, how good do we think they are right now. And so they started, talking through the schools. When they got to the top three, I think it's the top three that you hear most people talking about, but maybe not in the order. So they had Texas at 3, they had Georgia at 2, and they had LSU at number 1. And the reasoning for LSU being so high is that LSU has a returning starting quarterback. Georgia doesn't. Texas doesn't. The team they had at number 4, Alabama, does not. So they said that's really a separator, is that all these other schools are starting new quarterbacks. And that makes such a difference playing on the road in the SEC that they felt that was enough to give LSU the edge.
Being that that's their logic, I'm really shocked that South Carolina isn't up there on this list.
Yeah, they had South Carolina in their rankings as well.
I'm sure they did, but I mean, if their criteria is primarily around having a returning starting quarterback, Lenore Sellers, easily best quarterback in the SEC last year. Talent-wise, I mean, South Carolina was the talk of the town at the end of the season last year. They were the hottest team in college football. And they got a lot of guys coming back this year. Lenore Sellers going to be, top of the list there in the Heisman race. They've got some really good players coming back on defense too. One of the best edge rushers in the nation, Dylan Stewart. So I'm just kind of shocked that LSU is up there based off that criteria. But I mean, they are going to be a good team. They were in it till the end last year. With everything going on, I mean, the SEC depth wise, it's going to be tough. It really is, because the Texas A&M, they got a returning starting quarterback who's pretty good.
Right. I think they had him. They just did top 8 in this ranking. I think most of them had Texas A&M around 8 or 7. Oh, it's funny because I don't even think they ended up having Tennessee in the top 8. After the Nico Imalava situation. They had Florida in there, and a couple of guys were higher on Florida, and a couple others weren't. And that's one of the discussions we talk about. The guys who are high on them are assuming that Lagway is going to be fine. But the other guy said, look, that's placing a lot of faith in a guy who hasn't been throwing at spring practice. Maybe he's been cleared, but you've got to hope that his shoulder is okay. Florida definitely has some pieces there. They're a team that could, if Lagway is back healthy, look at the pieces they've got. They have a very, very strong receiving room. They had good guys coming back, and they've got an awesome freshman. They've got probably the best center in the country blocking up front. They've got some good young running backs, and they always have talent on defense. So they need that quarterback to tie it together, but they could make a run as well.
They're going to be much tougher this year, having a full year of Lagway potentially. A lot of coming off a lot of momentum last year, and Billy Napier really turning everything around. So there's a lot of confidence in Gainesville with that. But one team that I would probably look out for is Ole Miss with Austin Simmons at quarterback. We saw him come in against Georgia and he looked awesome. He looked better than Jackson Dart at that time.
Yeah, they mentioned that one drive. They said Austin Simmons had an immaculate drive against Georgia.
He did.
That's a guy that they actually recruited, right? And Kiffin has been this go get the quarterback out of the portal type of guy. So it's interesting that Kiffin has faith in him. And he did it on the one big stage that he really had last year. He showed up. So if he develops, Ole Miss is a team that's relying heavily on the portal around him. It worked sometimes last year. Sometimes it didn't. The game against Georgia, it did. The game against Kentucky, not so much. So,
yeah, but I mean, if there's a guy in the SEC that you would trust with quarterbacks is probably going to be Kiffin.
Kiffin, yeah.
Pretty good track record there.
Yeah. Another part of their discussion was when they decided to put Texas at 3. A lot of the country has Texas as the proverbial favorite in the SEC. They don't have the 100% confidence in Arch Manning that some people do. But to the other side of it, they said, but if his name wasn't Arch Manning and he didn't come in with all this expectation, would we be so critical of him? Would we be doubting him? Or would it be, it's a guy who's a third-year player who's getting ready to start? Would we be so hard on him? I don't know. And that's a good question, because if, let's say that Arch Manning was about to become the starter at Georgia, would Georgia be in that 3 position and Texas be in that 2 position? Just because as much as people like Arch Manning, there are just as many people questioning him. It's kind of an interesting conversation, right?
It is interesting. And it really just makes me kind of want to look back at how Quinn Ewers was treated last year coming into the season, because he was coming off a pretty good year, high expectations, and I can't imagine that it's really that different for Arch, other than Arch is coming in with just a handful of starts and spot time here and there, and when he did get a chance to play against really good teams like Georgia, it didn't go very well.
It'll be interesting because Texas had such a good offensive line last year too. They had arguably the best left tackle in the country protecting Ewers. And that's one area where they're a little bit different. Obviously, Arch Manning is a little bit more mobile than Ewers was. And Ewers was hurt all year last year. He had an ankle injury that let Arch Manning actually start, a game last year. So it'll be interesting to see.
But yeah, that is an interesting question though you bring up. If he was at Georgia, would it be the same? And if he wasn't Arch Manning,
there would be people questioning him, but it seems like sometimes some people are questioning him too much. They're like, oh, he can't be what he was expected to be. He played against crap competition in high school. He's just there because he's a Manning. All that kind of stuff that kind of goes with it.
True. But also, I mean, I think a big reason Texas gets a lot of the big boy status, outside of the fact that, yes, they're really solid in the trenches, but landing Arch Manning was a huge deal for Texas. That can't be understated. And that's when, people really are talking about, okay, Texas being back and all that, not winning a meaningless Sugar Bowl game.
Right.
Against Georgia.
Right. Because Sarkisian, when he got there, he had to rebuild that program. They had struggled, right? They had the Charlie Strong years, and then they had the Tom Herman years, and they never really figured it out, even though they were still Texas with all this history, with all this recruiting, with all this money. It needed somebody to turn it around. And as they were getting ready to come to the SEC, Steve Sarkisian, coming from Alabama, was the guy that understood what it took to transform a program, much like when Kirby, came back home to Georgia and kind of took Georgia from that next level of being under Coach Rick.
And going back to the criteria that we were talking about earlier with, having a returning starting quarterback really being a big part of LSU being, power rank number 1 here, Georgia's kind of the opposite. The rest of the team is really stacked. Georgia went out in the portal and bolstered that receiving room, which was really bad last year. And really the big question mark is going to be Gunnar Stockton in that offensive line. So interesting that it's kind of, role reversal there in terms of the power rankings.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Georgia's receiving room and their kind of skill positions as a whole could really surprise some people this fall. Obviously, you brought in Branch, you brought in Noah Thomas, you get Colby Young back, which not a lot of the country is, I think, even aware of that he's going to be back. And I think that's really a big deal. You get Dylan Bell back, You've got London Humphreys another year in the program, and you've got 2 5-star freshmen coming in. So this receiving room that struggled last year, if it is just remotely average this fall, and Georgia is able to run the ball remotely average, not 109th, 110th in the country, this offense is going to move the ball.
Well, also, don't forget about the tight ends. I mean, the pass catcher situation at Georgia this season is looking really, really good. I've talked about it before. It looks like one of the best all-around pass catching situations that Georgia's ever had.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me a lot of 2022, where we just had weapons to catch the ball. And I think that's part of the reason, that Stetson was so good, right?
Oh, yeah.
We love Stetson, and he made plays, but he wasn't the best arm talent. But he made good throws, and he had those guys around him. He had A.D. Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Kenny McIntosh, Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington. He just had lots of weapons to throw the ball to, and it made a difference.
Yep. It's just like you said. It's about the Jimmies and the Joes.
Yep. All right. So moving on from the favorites in the SEC to a school that, according to its head coach, is just looking to get back to a bowl game. And that coach is Hugh Freeze, and the program is Auburn. And man, what has happened to Auburn? One of the crown jewel programs of the SEC has had at least 4 losses in every season since the year that they played for the national championship in 2013, and it's missed bowl games the last few years.
Yeah, but it breaks your heart, right? As a Georgia fan. How sad is that to hear that from your head coach, that you're just looking to make a bowl game? I mean, right. I get trying to set expectations and manage that, because nothing will get you fired quicker than setting really, really high expectations as a coach and not coming anywhere close to it. So I get where he's coming from, but maybe don't say that part out loud.
Well, the other part of his argument was that he felt that their recruiting hadn't been very good, but that's not true. Auburn has still had good recruiting classes. Even under Harsin, they still recruited well. And maybe they weren't recruiting as good as some of the other schools in the SEC, but to say that they haven't been recruiting enough just to make bowl games, that I don't buy that. I think that didn't look good, and a lot of Auburn people were shocked by that comment.
I would be shocked too if I was an Auburn fan hearing that from my head coach, because they've also done pretty well in the portal, especially this past year.
Yeah. Yeah, they got Singleton from Georgia Tech, who some people thought the best player in the portal, at least the best offensive player in the portal. And they got Jackson Arnold, from Oklahoma, former 5-star quarterback. So they've got talent at receiver, certainly. Cam Coleman's back. They've got Singleton. They've got some good players, and they've got a good defense. It'll just be if they can put it together and navigate. Once again, they have a tough schedule. They always do. You've got Georgia and Bama on your schedule every year. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if they make it back in the next year or two. I feel like Hugh Freeze is a good coach. We saw him do some really good things at Ole Miss when it was illegal to do the things that you can do today. And then when you look at, who they have to play every year, Georgia and Alabama. Georgia's not going anywhere as long as Kirby's there. Alabama, you don't know. Could keep, business as usual, or it could start degrading since, Saban's not there anymore.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing, even though Auburn has not been as good as Alabama over the last 20 years and in the Saban years, they were the one team that consistently could beat Alabama. Auburn and LSU were the only teams that had even remotely okay records against Alabama in Saban's tenure. Saban went 13-5 against LSU and 12-5 against Auburn while he was the coach at Alabama. Everybody else, he crushed. Kirby's 1-6 against Alabama. in his career at Georgia.
Georgia's done really well against Auburn, going back to Rick. That's just been one team that Georgia's done really, really well against.
Absolutely. Georgia has absolutely dominated Auburn. I mean, we lost in the regular season in 2017. That's the only time they've lost to Auburn since
Cam Newton.
Well, 2013, the prayer at Jordan Hare. And then before that, and before that, Cam Newton. So that was a series, that when we were in school, the Georgia Auburn series was even.
That's right. It was like the craziest, most even series ever.
And the road team always won.
That was that. But it was down to so close as like 3 points separating them at one point. They had the same record, but separated by 3 points. It was wild, and now it's not even close. Which, hey, go Dogs!
Yeah, I think for Auburn, if the Hugh Freeze hire doesn't work out and they end up having to fire him in a couple years, it will just continue the line of bad decisions that Auburn has made at the coaching position for years. It started when Tommy Tuberville was there and he was still the coach, and they tried to hire Bobby Petrino while he was still the coach.
It always seems like that Auburn fans never like their head coach.
They always want what's next. They always want the next guy.
Outsider looking in, that's what the appearance is.
And I think it's also because they've always had a couple of power people that jerk that program around. After Tuberville finally did leave, they hired Gene Chizik, who that was a questionable call, but then they had his offensive coordinator was Gus Malzahn. Well, lots of people saw Gus Malzahn as really the coach, not Chizik. They won a national championship with Cam Newton, and then 2 years later in 2012, they fired Chizik. They brought in Malzahn. Malzahn, seen as this was the guy that really got us the national championship, not Chizik. They went back to the national championship game in 2013, and then Malzahn stuck around for a long time. They always were like, we wanted to fire him, but then he would pop up and beat Alabama, and instead of saying, okay, let's see what happens next year, they would give him an extension on his contract. And they kept stringing him along, and they waited too long to get rid of Malzahn. And then they hired Brian Harsin, which was a horrible decision, a guy who wasn't from the South, who did not fit. And now they hire Hugh Freeze, who was a guy, once again, who was kind of disgraced from the SEC, both for stuff that is now legal and, personal transgressions off the field. If this doesn't work out, it's just more egg on their face. Auburn has consistently been a power program, but here lately, their coaching decisions have just really, really hurt them. And I think that's why they've kind of moved down in terms of the power in the SEC.
Yeah, that Brian Harsin's hire was so random. It was so random. Maybe they were trying to maybe they thought that they were getting the next Urban Meyer. I don't know. It was so out of the blue.
Yeah. I don't know if it was because he was cheaper because they were still paying so much money to Malzahn, or if somebody else didn't want to take the situation because they saw how coaches were being treated there.
That's a good point too. But if they were just doing that because of the money situation, I mean, they weren't doing themselves any favors, because if you string a bunch of bad seasons together, your program is really going to suffer. And then, you really will start to have bad recruiting classes. So Freeze better do something this year, because we know those Auburn faithful they got itchy trigger fingers. On a more fun topic, it's looking like there's going to be flag football played at the Olympics, and the NFL is going to allow their players to play in these flag football Olympics.
Yeah, it actually came out this afternoon that the NFLPA approved it. So NFL players will be allowed to play in the 2028 Summer Olympics, which are in Los Angeles.
That's awesome. That's going to be just an ass whooping.
Yes. And of course, the first thing is, who are the guys that are going to be on the team, right? The NFL, obviously the joke was, I feel bad for the guy from Latvia who has to go up and line up on the other side of Derrick Henry.
Yeah. Or Justin Jefferson. I mean,
right.
I mean, you just pick anybody. I mean, geez.
Yeah. And obviously at the NFL level, you've got these guys that, because flag football is different than tackle football. Obviously, it's speed, it's quickness, it's getting things out quickly, and you don't have big linemen that are blocking all the time. So there's those guys you think of at the NFL level, right? That would be, those are the guys I want in flag football, right? Like Michael Penix, he seems like a guy that you would want in flag football.
Ladd McConkey is who you want in flag football.
Right, a guy who can run routes.
If there's a guy that you want in flag football, it's Ladd McConkey all day.
Or a guy like Bijan Robinson who can kind of do it all, who can really, really move and cut. Hell, DeAndre Swift, a couple years ago, maybe not now, but man, just the dead leg cuts that he used to do would be perfect, I think, for that realm. But as kind of a fun what-if situation, I thought it'd be fun to look at the current crop of college football players. If you had to form an Olympic team of college football players, current college football players, and keeping in mind that, for flag football, you don't have a ton of linemen and positions. So what would you pick? Who would be the guys that you would pick? So I kind of asked you this question. I did it myself. We picked one quarterback, one wide receiver, one running back, one flex, one offensive line, one linebacker, one D lineman, and one DB. So let's start at the quarterback position. Who would you take as your quarterback?
So I kind of was going back and forth on this because, I tried not to go with like the complete obvious pick, but in this case, I couldn't really find a way around it because you look at this guy's numbers. He had great passing numbers, but he also had almost 800 yards rushing last year, and that's Cade Klubnik from Clemson. That combination there, that would be a great flag football quarterback.
Yeah. And he's he's a tough runner. He can take a hit. You don't need that in flag football, but you do need that shiftiness, that factor that makes you a good guy who can take hits. It makes you understand your body position. I picked a guy that I thought was great at improvising. That was kind of always on the run, but made crazy plays. I picked Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt.
Which I love that pick. I love that pick. That was such a good one.
Like, I just think he'd be fun, and he would be out there just doing crazy stuff because why not?
Yeah, the other quarterback that I was going back and forth on was Lenore Sellers.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, South Carolina, the state of South Carolina has got some good quarterbacks.
Yeah. So up next, wide receiver position, and I think we both picked the same guy. That one's obvious. It's Jeremiah Smith, best receiver in college football, best route runner, best speed guy, best hands.
Maybe best player in the country. I mean, just beast mode.
And a lot of these guys in flag football, you might be playing two ways. He's a guy you can stick out there and cover as well. He'd be able to hang with, the best out there.
Absolutely. All right. So now it's going to get a little more tricky because it's not the obvious positions here. So who do you got at running back?
I picked a guy who, as a freshman last year, kind of has the reputation as one of the fastest running backs in the country, had over 1,000 yards, and that's Isaac Brown of Louisville. I think he's just a guy that you could really get the ball to and let him go. Who'd you pick?
I went with Kaytron Allen. And the reason I went with him is the games that I actually saw of him last year in the playoffs and, learning more about him, how his season went. He's got a hell of a burst and he's just super elusive. So that was a big reason, like we said, flag football, you want to be fast, you want to be elusive, you don't want people getting your flags. So Kaytron Allen, I think he would be a great player as a running back.
Yeah, I like that choice. So up next, we had a flex position. When I started thinking about this, I looked for a guy that I thought, what is the definition of flex? And I think nobody in college football fits this more than Nick Harbor, the tight end / wide receiver / track athlete freak out of South Carolina. That dude is nuts. He's big. He's tall. He's like, I think he's like 6'6" or 6'7", but he's a record-setting track athlete. Just crazy, crazy intangibles. Can go up and get the ball. Could block if you need him to. So that's who I went with as my flex player. How about you?
Solid pick. I went for straight up speed and elusiveness. So I went with Ryan Williams from Bama. Let's just hope he can hold on to the ball.
Yeah. Man, imagine being a quarterback and having Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams.
Oh my God. I mean, just say F it. One of them's down there.
Oh, offensive line is not as important in flag football. A lot of times your center is also going out for passes. So I just picked up the biggest guy that I could think of that takes up space. That's Caden Proctor, Alabama, probably going to be a top 5 pick in the draft next year. Just a beast of a man. If I've got to pick somebody up there to protect who's not running routes, that's my dude.
Yeah, I went a little deeper in my research on this one. I ended up going with Emil Wagner from Notre Dame, and reason is Notre Dame last year, their running game was great. There's no way, shape, or form about it. They're just a great running game, and they were solid in pass game. So Notre Dame pumping out some good linemen in the past few years. So give me Emil Wagner as my starting lineman. He's probably got good hands too, because linemen do.
At linebacker, so I see that your pick was actually my original pick for linebacker. So you had CJ Allen. Obviously, we know the potential is there at Georgia 2 years ago. He was the guy who kind of speed, and he kind of was the guy that drove off Jamon Dumas-Johnson. Had a decent year last year, but really think that he's going to be taking off this next year. For my pick, I picked Drake Bowen, the linebacker from Notre Dame. Just makes a ton of plays. I think he was second or first on the team in tackles last year. Just a guy that is all over the field, moves around. One of the country's best defenses last year is coming back. So I took Drake Bowen, Notre Dame.
Solid pick. So next we got our edge rushers. I went with Dylan Stewart from South Carolina. So I mentioned earlier, South Carolina has really good, solid guys coming back on defense. And this is one of the guys I was talking about. Freshman last year, and had a really good freshman campaign, and looks to continue that and take another step forward. So give me Dylan Stewart.
That's a good choice. I like that one. My pick, I went with Matayo Uiagalelei. Yes, the younger brother of DJ Uiagalelei, but is a awesome kind of edge pass rusher out of Oregon. I think he had 10 sacks last year. Is coming back. You need a guy you can go after and get it. And in flag football, the quarterback's moving around a lot and is prone to run. So you need a guy who's not going to just go straight to the quarterback, can move around and chase him a little bit too. So I went with the edge from Oregon, Matayo Uiagalelei.
Questionable pick, just because of the last name. Mateo U. I love it.
One position left on the field. Defensive back. Once again, a guy that could also play some offense, because, in flag football, your DBs are often also times your receivers. I went with KJ Bolden, sophomore safety from Georgia. Was a 5-star player as a receiver and as a defensive back out of high school. figured he could go both ways. Stepped in and started most of the year last year as a freshman. Was a really, really good player and is going to probably be one of those leaders in the secondary next year for Georgia. I think he'd be all over the field. I think he'd be a good one to have.
Absolutely. Solid pick with KJ Bolden. He's going to be a special player. I went with another very special player, Caleb Downs. He can absolutely do it all, whether it's offense, defense, kick return. He's just one of those special athletes that can do it all. So give me Caleb Downs as my DB / whatever.
Yep. So great picks. I think this will be fun to see what happens over the next couple of years, what players put their names out there. The NFLPA is behind it, so obviously they're going to let the pros do it without much pushback. I mean, I'm sure some teams will say they don't want their players to play, but it's flag football, so you would hope that there are not as many injuries. Of course, there could be some knee and leg injuries, but you're not getting concussions. So,
question is, what other countries could be decent at flag football?
Right. Or what other countries will have players play for them that, much like in things like the World Baseball Classic, sometimes in soccer, they have dual citizenship or, from another country and they go play because maybe Team USA is too stacked.
Yeah. I could see Canada being pretty decent because they straight up play American football.
Germany, football's pretty popular in Germany.
Yeah.
It's got a big following there. And then the dark horse teams to watch out for, man, there's any of the Samoan descendant countries.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Australia, New Zealand. And then, also include South Africa that have rugby traditions. Flag football shares a lot of rugby, a lot of quick passing out of the ball and laterals and things like that. So those would be ones that I would think could have a chance to compete as well. This will probably be a situation much like, with the dream team.
It's going to be really good at flag football.
Who's that?
Georgia.
the country of Georgia? I don't know how much flag football they're playing out on the rocky, mountainous country of Georgia. But it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a cool new sport. And I don't think it's a permanent thing. I think because the United States is hosting, they got to pick a sport that they wanted to have it, so it's interesting. Flag football is growing a lot here, obviously in the United States. Actually, I was over at the high school this past weekend and girls flag football was going on. It's a varsity sport now, here in the state of Georgia. So should be fun in 2028.
Yep. Flag football is definitely growing. All right. Anything else?
No, I don't have anything else for tonight. I will be on vacation next week somewhere in the ocean. So it'll be solo Burl next week. And then we'll be back in a couple weeks. Stay tuned for some announcements here on the channel coming soon. We are going to be working on a new series highlighting the top 50 Georgia players of the 2000s. We're currently in production. So look for that in a couple weeks. Be sure to
in the 2000s so it's after 1999.
Yes. No Herschel Walker.
Let's be clear.
So be sure to drop us a comment, drop us a like, and please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'm Streit.
I'm Burl.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.